Hello, 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 everybody. I'm Professor Plink. I respond to various theological and ideological questions and claims from a rationalistic and naturalistic approach in an effort to give and explain the opposite viewpoint and help to balance the conversation. Well, today is my second ever live stream, and I did pretty well with my first one a few weeks back. I hope this one goes also as well. And today's focus is going to be twofold. Two things I wanted to do with this stream today. As is mentioned in the title, it's a bit of a celebration for 5K subs. I reached 5,000 subscribers just a few days ago, and we've already gone past that. And that's a pretty big accomplishment as far as I'm concerned, considering that my entire channel is only 3 months old. So it was exactly 3 months ago, yesterday actually, that I put up my very first video, and in just 3 short months I've already grown to 5,000 subscribers. And you know, there's a lot of bigger channels out there that might say 5K is not that much, but I think it's a pretty good growth for such short of a time frame. And I owe that all to you guys, so thank you to everybody who has continued to watch my videos and comment and subscribe and continue to do so. If you like my channel, you like what I do around here, and you want to help continue to support me, certainly subscribe if you haven't already. Smash the like button of this live stream, as well as any of my other videos, and comment as well. All that engagement is really awesome. Also, I would like to say, if anybody ever wants to make any suggestions of videos they'd like to see me deal with and respond to, absolutely feel free to do so. I peruse the comments section pretty regularly with most of my videos, so anytime anybody makes a suggestion for a video to respond to, I always check it out. So a couple of my videos have been from suggestions from viewers, so if you have any, certainly shoot them my way as well. So yes, very, very grateful for all the success you all have helped me to achieve to this point, 5,000 subscribers in just a few short months. And then also what we're going to do tonight is a Q&A. About a week or so ago, I put a post on my community tab for questions that anybody has for me, and I've got a bunch of my favorite ones picked out. I'll go through some of those. Also, I've got the chat up so that I can see what you guys are posting. If anybody has any questions for me in the live chat, I will try to get to those some as well. Certainly I'll prioritize any super chats or anything like that that comes in as well. So that's what we're aiming for tonight. Bit of a Q&A, a little bit more about the questions that people have submitted to me, and some more interactions with you guys in the live chat. So let's waste no time and dive into some of those questions that I got off of my community tab. And so the first one I wanted to get to is one that was reiterated by a few different people in the community tab. A few different people put this particular question out there, and it's one I figured I would get eventually. Critical Path was the first one to submit it, asking, "Are you really a professor?" So yes, I figured that one would be coming eventually. Yes, indeed, I am actually a professor. I am a professor of communication studies, and that has a lot of different areas to it. There's a lot of different parts to communication studies. My primary areas of focus are broadcast journalism and broadcasting itself, public speaking, and rhetorical criticism. So I primarily went after broadcast journalism because that was the field I was really most interested in and wanted to go into. And doing broadcast journalism, you can do it one of two ways. You can either go into the journalism field and study broadcast journalism as just one aspect of journalism, or you can go into communication studies, which is focused on broadcasting, and then do broadcast journalism from there. And that's what I did because I wanted to do all sorts of broadcasting, not just broadcast journalism. And actually, I do have, to this day, I have 2 jobs. One is as a professor teaching communication studies, and one is as a broadcast journalist at my local radio station. So yes, that's what I went into, and I've been a professor of communication studies now for 12 years. I think I started teaching in 2010, and I teach a variety of classes in terms of public speaking, and rhetorical criticism, which I mentioned a minute or so ago. Rhetorical criticism deals a lot with logical argumentation, deals with making good arguments versus being able to suss out bad arguments, and that is what kind of pulled me into wanting to start making my own response videos, because if you've noticed by any of my videos that you've watched, I very often will point out fallacies in people's logic and arguments. So yeah, I do spend a lot of time teaching my students about that, about making good arguments versus making bad arguments, avoiding logical fallacies, and I see those all the time in apologetics arguments, just tons and tons of logical fallacies. So I would often see other atheist channels criticizing apologist arguments, and sometimes occasionally pointing out their logical fallacies, but I wasn't seeing as much of that as I wanted to, so I thought I could add something to the conversation and start making some of my own videos. So that was kind of what got me interested in doing videos of my own in the first place. So yes, indeed I am a professor. And people have wondered and asked me in some of the comments section about my being a professor. Sometimes they think I might be a science professor because I talk a lot about the Big Bang and cosmology, or a philosophy professor, but communication studies is my area of expertise. So, next question. We'll move right along. So, next question comes from Tom Godwin, asking, what is your favorite thing about the place, state that you live in? Tom is from Kansas, likes the weather, born in California, says he sure does miss In-N-Out. Okay, so I'm from Illinois. I live in Illinois now, and my favorite thing about the state that I live in is probably that it is not where I was born. So, confession time. I was born in a place called Gallatin, Tennessee. Gallatin, Tennessee is about 20 or so miles north of Mount Juliet, Tennessee. Mount Juliet, Tennessee is where Greg Locke operates his congregation out of. So I was born just a stone's throw away from where Greg Locke preaches at this day. And if I had continued to live there, if I had been raised there, I wouldn't have been going to Greg Locke's church as a child, because when I was born, he would have been about 6 years old. So, yeah, he wasn't preaching at that time. But certainly the people and families who make up his congregation, I would have been living around them. I would have been ensconced in that subculture, that religious subculture. Greg Locke comes out of the Baptist church, and the Baptist church has a big presence there in that area. It's near Nashville, Tennessee, so a lot of Baptist churches around there. And Greg Locke's way of thinking would have been all over the place. I would have been going to school with kids who come from families who espouse those sorts of ideas. And even though my parents never would have espoused the kind of things that Greg Locke says, I would have been surrounded by it quite a bit, and I would certainly it would have gotten permeated into my way of thinking, because, as we all know, one of the main predictors of what you think about religion is your geography, where you come from. So I'm certainly glad I did not get raised in the state that I was born in Tennessee. As a matter of fact, it was 2 weeks to the day after I was born that my parents loaded up the family in the moving van and moved to Illinois, which is where both my parents were originally from. They wanted my family to, myself and my sister, to be around our extended family. All my cousins, grandparents, and everything are here in Illinois. So, yeah, that's probably my favorite thing about Illinois, is that it's not Tennessee and where I was born. You know, it's not a perfect place. There's no such thing as a perfect state, but I think there's a lot about my state that I can be proud of. At the current political climate, with Roe versus Wade very likely going to be overturned, Illinois is a very forward-thinking state in that regard. Roe versus Wade gets overturned, it goes back to the states to decide for themselves. Illinois already has it enshrined that reproductive rights are going to be maintained for people who are pregnant. I'm very happy about that. Legalized recreational use marijuana about a year or so ago, so very forward thinking in that. So yeah, I like my state pretty well. It's got some money problems, finance problems, and there's a lot of corruption in Chicago, which controls a lot of the politics of the state. So it's got its problems, but at the very least I can say it's not the area where I was born. So that's what I would say for what I like about my state that I live in. All right. Everyone Needs a Smile in the chat asks, being from Tennessee, do you know of Nate Bargatze? I do not. I'm not familiar with the name. So if anybody wants to, in a comment section of a video, post any Nate Bargatze stuff so that I could maybe check it out, because yeah, I'm unfamiliar with Nate. Not heard that name before. Henry DeGraff posted the question, why the name Professor Plink? Same with the avatar. Do they mean anything to you, or are they just a fun addition? So, yeah, the Professor Plink and the character that I use, the avatar, largely came about through happenstance. When I decided to make a channel a few months back, I knew I wanted to use an avatar as both a channel mascot and a vehicle by which to address without being on camera. And so I just went to a random website that had a bunch of free use avatars. I found a couple different ones that I kind of liked, and I photoshopped them together into the Professor Plink character. So then I needed to come up with a name, and didn't put a whole lot of thought into it because he's pink. I just slapped an L in the word and said Plink, and then I thought about something to add to that, because Plink was just one syllable, a little too short. And I thought, hey, I'm a professor. Professor Plink kind of rolls off the tongue pretty well, and that's why I used the name. So yeah, I didn't put a whole heck of a lot of thought into it, because at the time I didn't know whether the channel would ever take off, be anything more than just my own little corner of YouTube to post videos that nobody would ever see but myself. So yeah, I just came up with the little avatar on the fly, came up with the name for him on the fly, really didn't put much more than about 10 minutes worth of thought into it. But I do like both the character, and I kind of like the name too, because while I didn't think about it at the time, people have mentioned to me that Plink is a slang term that is used for taking aim at different things. Kind of the idea is like if you were target shooting cans off of a windowsill or something, makes a plink sound. And yeah, I kind of take aim at different religions or different theological beliefs and ideas, and kind of take aim at them, and like, oh, it kind of works with what I do. So I kind of enjoy that aspect of it. So yeah, it's a fun addition to my channel, and I think an interesting little mascot to be a little more interesting to look at than just somebody who puts their camera on and just starts talking. Also, just to rag on myself a little bit here, I do work in radio, and I've been told a number of times I have a face for radio in jest. But yeah, I've always thought that a little cartoon character is a bit better to have as a focal point for a video like this than somebody just turning on their camera and sitting there talking at it. Steel Rain in the chat asked, I have a question for you. How close to Mithra do you think Christianity is? I'm not sure what you mean by Mithra, so that's another thing. If somebody could provide me some extra information on that, that'd be great. Everyone Needs a Smile says that Nate Bargatze is a comedian, not religious. Sorry, just interesting connection in how close you two seem to have grown up. Oh, okay. Well, I love comedians, so I'll definitely look into some of his work, and maybe it'll provide me with a laugh or two. Always like that. Brian Stevens asked in the chat, you have a degree, so you are knowledgeable about Kelvin. What is your take on autodidactics? I don't have a take on it off the top of my head, but maybe something I'll try to look into. Trying to Smash gave a super chat, $2. just a little animated hey you. Hey to you too, trying to smash. But did follow it up with a question. Do you think your ideas private publicly? Do you keep your ideas private publicly? I understand being concerned about being a public atheist now that the woke mob realizes we tend to actually think about their opinions before we join. Do I keep my atheism private? In my personal life, for the most part, the people I think need to know do know. My friends know. My close friends know. My close family knows. My extended family and extended assortment of people in my life, I don't go into it with. They know I'm not religious, pretty much. That I don't go to church. I don't have a church community that I engage with. So I don't keep it a secret because there's nobody I really need to keep it a secret from, but I also don't announce it. I don't go around to people who I know who are openly religious and start ragging on them for being religious and start telling them that I'm an atheist and you need to be too. Like I don't make it an issue in my personal life. Stephen Weber posted on the community tab a question. I've seen a couple examples in different channels of atheists complaining about topics they don't like seeing on atheist channels. It's somewhat confusing to me how we decide what an appropriate atheistic topic is, considering the broad potential range. One example I've seen a couple of times is people not liking political content. This is something I find intriguing, as I don't care very much about religion until it does get embroiled in politics. Also, I'm not pleased with the mindset of avoiding controversial topics, as that tends to be where most of the juicy content hangs out. And it also makes it hard to explore perspectives we aren't familiar with. Should atheist content creators stick with low-hanging fruit or challenge the harder topics as well? All right. So, yes, very often religion and politics intermingles, obviously. Especially in the United States, happens very frequently. And no, I don't think that political topics should be avoided or that necessarily one should just stick to quote-unquote low-hanging fruit. I don't necessarily view religious content as low-hanging fruit. Certainly there's some. There's some just absolute lolcows who don't make good arguments whatsoever, and if you make a response video to them, you're kind of just poking fun at them for being so silly. But there's obviously a bunch of apologists and a bunch of religious content creators who have huge platforms, huge channels, a lot of people pay attention to them, and at least attempt to make solid, logical arguments. And so I don't view just all religion and religious content as low-hanging fruit. I see it as being probably one of the biggest kind of things that one could deal with and try to explore. Politics is another big one. Those are kind of the two big ones. There's the old saying that there are three things you don't discuss with people: religion, politics, and the Great Pumpkin. So, those are politics and religion are kind of the two big ones. And when they coincide, it's certainly something that should be talked about if one who makes a channel feels like doing so. I haven't delved into it much in any of my videos as of yet, but I'm not opposed to it. I'm not going to shy away from it, and probably, again, with the Roe versus Wade stuff coming down the pike, it will become much bigger than it even is right now. I imagine I'll probably talk about that at some point, and other political matters in general. So, for me, I don't necessarily think I'll shy away from it. But for other content creators, I think it's up to every content creator to decide for themselves what they want to focus on and what they don't. If some people want to delve into politics as well as religion, that's fine. Some people want to delve into science and religion, or science and politics, or just science, or just religion, or just politics. To each their own. And I think that there's an audience for practically any topic and anything that somebody wants to delve into. All right. So, okay, Brian Stevens clarified a question. Sorry for the previous typo. Did you ever notice just how many of the theistic arguments involve syllogisms, and if so, why does it seem so common? Yes, there's a lot of religious arguments that try to utilize syllogisms. My favorite religious argument to rag on, the Kalam cosmological argument, attempts to use a syllogism, and the ontological argument attempts to utilize syllogisms. I think the reason they tend to be so prevalent in not just religious arguments, but almost any kind of argument, is because if a syllogism is sound, it's a good way of trying to prove a claim. It's a good way of making a solid argument that is very difficult to deny. The problem is that a lot of times people get too overzealous about their syllogism. They don't put it through enough logical filters in their own minds and recognize where it's good or where it's bad. And that's exactly what happens with the Kalam cosmological argument and William Lane Craig. Both of the major and the minor premise of his syllogism is flawed. And I go over that in depth in my video talking about the Kalam cosmological argument. With the ontological argument, the idea of maximally great being existing in some universe, and it exists in every universe, and it exists in our universe, is also very flawed. And when these syllogisms are created, I think the people who create them don't put a lot of thought into them. That's just like, this sounds good, so I'm going to go with it, and it's a good way to prove my claim. I don't think it really is all the time, but for people who are trying to make a logical argument, syllogisms are a good way to do it if your syllogism is sound. Piao Meow Noir gave a super chat. Stand to reason stands for the opposite of reason. Stand to Reason, I agree, has a lot of problems. Stand to Reason and Greg Koukl have a lot of flaws in their thinking, and I don't see a whole lot of reason in a lot of the things that they say. So I agree with you on that 100%. So Dominic Mahoney posted on the community tab, do you think professional apologetics is being shown to be a joke at this stage? How important is it to you that you continue to do this work? Would this ever be a full-time job for you? So as far as professional apologetics being a joke, as I said a little bit ago, there's different apologists, and some are more silly than others. When it comes to the aforementioned William Lane Craig and Greg Koukl, I think they are among some of the most well-respected apologists, but I think their arguments have a lot of flaws in them, leave a lot to be desired. I wouldn't necessarily say anybody who is attempting to make a solid argument is necessarily a joke, so long as they're doing it honestly and they're really making an effort, which is why I think there needs to be people on the other side who push back, try to show them the flaws in their thinking, show them the flaws in their argument. And that way, even if they don't necessarily end up agreeing with you by the end of the discussion, anybody who's listening, any viewers, will have seen both sides of it and be able to make an informed decision about whether or not they agree with the arguments or disagree with them. So it's all just about coming to greater understandings, no matter which side of the aisle you're trying to do that from. So I wouldn't necessarily call anyone a joke for doing that. But that's why I do think it is important for myself and others to continue to do this and push back against bad arguments and bad ideas like that. Would I ever consider doing this as a full-time job? Well, like I said, I currently have 2 full-time jobs as a professor and as a broadcast journalist. Now that it's summer, I've got the summer break going on, so I'm down to just 1 full-time job right now, which is why I have more time to make videos throughout the summer months. If I were to ever do this full-time, it would necessitate leaving behind one of my other 2 professions, and I could see myself doing that, possibly. Maybe leaving behind the broadcasting thing, but I don't know that I could leave behind teaching, because I've really fallen in love with that over the last decade or so, and I really like being in the classroom and explaining how to make good arguments and good critical thinking skills to students, and seeing that look in their eyes when they get something that they didn't get before, and helping them understand rhetorical fallacies and become better public speakers. I really enjoy doing that, so I couldn't leave that behind, but I could see myself maybe moving away from the broadcasting to spend more time doing this if my channel continues to grow and be popular into the future. All right. And then Stephen Weber in the chat asks, if it's not private, what's your education specialized in? I did mention this at the beginning of the stream that I am a communications studies professor. So my focus is in rhetorical criticism, broadcast journalism, and public speaking. Timothy Williams asks, do you find that formerly Christian atheists misrepresent Christian interpretations? It could be that Christianity itself is too diverse to single out one theology in it, but I've watched several YouTubers that seem to misrepresent or not understand Christianity, at least as I understood it. I don't think that formerly Christian atheists misrepresent Christianity much. That might go on to some degree. Certainly people who were once religious and are now atheists can sometimes be very angry at the religion that they've come out of and can sometimes be unfair to that religion. But for the most part, I think most formerly Christian atheists make the attempt to represent the Christian beliefs that they came out of as honestly as they understood them. That's certainly what I do. I was a Roman Catholic, and when I talk about Catholicism, I talk about it as I understood it for the years that I spent as a practicing Catholic. I don't ever try to misrepresent the faith that I came out of. And when it comes to other flavors of Christianity, be that Jehovah's Witnesses, be that Mormons, be that Baptists, Lutherans, just whatever, I don't ever try to misrepresent any of those either. If it's one of those other denominations of Christian that I'm not as familiar with, I try to do a little research on it, try to expand my knowledge of it a little bit before I start talking about it. But I do make an honest attempt not to misrepresent it. And I think most of the other YouTube atheists who were formerly religious, I get the sense that they try to do the same. I don't see a lot of gross misrepresentations of the Christian position from formerly Christian atheists. Piao Meow Noir says, keep up the good fight, sir. Honestly wish they would stop making atheists bad and giving into pseudoscience and logically fallacious excuses. And then also goes on to say, made an error, here's $2 more. Oh, heck yes. Well, thank you. Thank you very much, Piao Meow Noir. Yes, I agree that I wish there wasn't as much animosity between atheists and religious people, and that they would stop occasionally trying to imply that we're bad or sinful and we just want to sin, giving into pseudoscience and logical fallacies. Yeah, I wish all that too, but, que sera, sera. What are you going to do? The best we can do is try to keep them engaged in the conversation and try to push back against those bad reasonings and pseudoscience and fallacious reasonings. All right. Moving along to some more questions. All right, so another question on the community tab came from Unknown Dane. Says, my favorite go-to question is twofold. Favorite apologist argument, not what you find most convincing, just what you enjoy covering, and most disliked apologist argument with the similar caveat as above. All right, so favorite apologist argument that I enjoy covering. Well, my favorite one to rag on, as I said earlier, is the Kalam cosmological argument. Matter of fact, any argument that tries to engage in logical reasoning, syllogisms or a logical argumentation, those are the ones I tend to enjoy going after the most, enjoy covering the most. I feel there's a lot to cover when picking apart premises and finding the holes in them and finding all the fallacious reasoning in them. So as that's what I teach in my courses, that's what I enjoy talking about in my videos as well. So those sorts of things would be some of the most enjoyable. Not all the time when it comes to syllogisms, though. The ontological argument, the one about if a maximally great being is possible, then he exists in some possible world, exists in all possible world, exists in our world. That one right from the start was crazy to me from the first time I heard it. And even though it's easy to pick apart, it's also just nutty that anyone could hear that and find it convincing. Most disliked apologist argument: anytime they try to use the Bible to prove the Bible. Anytime they start quoting scripture in an attempt to convince atheists to believe in God. It's like, we don't believe in the Bible. So it's circular argument. It's a bad argument by authority, with the Bible being the authority. You know, anytime they pull out the old statements of a fool has said that there is no God, things like that, is like, I don't care what it says in your holy book. So that's not convincing to any atheist. You can't use the Bible to prove the Bible to people who don't believe in the Bible. Trying to Smash did a super chat, gave $10, said, have you ever looked into the mythicist argument? Doesn't bother me if it is or isn't true. It seems that the argument has never been fully examined, as the experts have been biased. So, mythicism, the idea of whether or not Jesus actually existed in the form of one person that all the stories are about, it's not a huge area of interest for me. I've looked into it, and I'm comfortable with either position, honestly. I'm comfortable with the idea that there was one person named Jesus of Nazareth who was a faith leader and did most of the non-supernatural stuff that is talked about in the Bible. Preached to people and preached love of your fellow man and all that. And didn't do any of the miracles, obviously, because I don't believe in them. But I'm also perfectly comfortable with the idea that there was no one person named Jesus, and that the Jesus in the Bible is a amalgamation of different faith leaders of that day, and not necessarily any one individual. Seeing as either way, I don't believe in God, and I don't believe that any Jesus who existed was the Son of God, or did any miracles, or rose from the dead, or anything like that. It's not a huge concern of mine whether there was a Jesus or not. Certainly if there wasn't, then Christianity is totally bunk. So it's a good way of disproving Christianity if you can prove that the Bible, that the Jesus of the Bible never existed. But even if he did, I don't believe that he was the Son of God, so it doesn't really matter. And let me pull up another question here. Oh, yes, and I see that Shannon Q is in the chat. That is so awesome. Hi, Shannon. Good to see you. It's so awesome that some of the bigger names of YouTube, anti-apologists and atheists, actually know who I am. That's really awesome. And Piao Meow Noir has been giving me some super chats and posted a question into the community tab. So I've got that ready to go. Piao Meow Noir says, what about religious apologists irritates the most out of you? Is it their presuppositions and confirmation bias for their God, or their logically fallacious arguments, or their attacks on science and atheism for scriptural reasons, or standing by pseudoscientific proponents, or a combination of such, or things that I did not list? Yeah, I mean, all of the above are things that irritate me about apologists, certainly. If I had to find one thing that I find the most irritating about apologists, I would probably lean into the relying on logically fallacious arguments. I mean, again, that's one of the reasons I started making videos in the first place, was that I wanted to call out the bad reasoning of people who were trying to make logical reasonings for believing in God. But yeah, presupposition and confirmation bias is a big thing. I mean, presuppositionalism itself is lunacy. It is craziness, and it's oftentimes it can be really difficult to try to argue with a presuppositionalist because they're starting from the standpoint that God exists, and they expect you to do the same. And if you do that for them, if you meet them where they're at, they've already won the argument because you're already presupposing God's existence. So it's hard to even have a conversation with a presuppositionalist. Some of the other things they do, like you said, reliance on scriptural reasons, standing by pseudoscientific proponents. Yeah, all of that is very irritating. The pseudoscientific aspects of some Christian apologists, like denying evolution in favor of creationism, especially young earth creationism. I didn't know young earth creationism existed until I was a teenager. I probably almost made it to high school before I was even aware that there were people who thought that the world was only 6,000 years old. And when I was first introduced to that notion, I thought I was being punked at first. I'm like, you're kidding me. I was aware of the creationist idea, Adam and Eve, Garden of Eden, all that. I was aware of the 7-day thing, of the creation in 7 days in Genesis, but I thought everybody was on the same page that the whole 7 days of creation was a metaphor, and that it still took billions of years, and that even if you believed in the Garden of Eden and Adam and Eve, that you understood that that was a long, long, long time ago. Then I found out there were people who actually believed that the earth was only 6,000 years old, and that they thought that that was a scientifically plausible way of thinking. And my mind was well and truly blown at that point. So, yeah, took a while to get used to the idea that there were people who thought that and were not under the care of a physician for it. But, yeah, all that stuff I find irritating as well. So, Critical Thinker then asks, what specific topics do you consider yourself most knowledgeable about? I know I talk a lot in a lot of my videos about science. I talk about the Big Bang, and I've talked about the Planck time, and I've talked about cosmology itself and all that. As I've said, I have no formal training in any of that. I'm not a scientist. I never took anything beyond the basic science courses, but I am a science enthusiast, and in the last several years, the last decade or so, I've become a much bigger fan of it than I was during my education. And if I liked science as much back then when I was in school as I do now, I probably would have gone into the sciences. So while I don't have any formal training in things like physics or astrophysics or anything like that, I am a big fan of it, and I do kind of research it on my own just for fun from time to time. So I consider myself at least mildly, layman's terms wise, knowledgeable about some basic physics, which is why I have brought it up in some of my videos. Mostly I'm most knowledgeable about logical argumentation and ways to suss out bad arguments, which is why I do a lot of that in my videos as well. Okay, so then another question that came into the community tab. Do a tier ranking of bad theist arguments. Well, there are just so many. If I was going from worst to best, let's see. Obviously the worst, I titled my video, The Worst Argument for the Existence of God, is the Kalam cosmological argument. In and of itself, I don't think it is the absolute worst, but I think it rises to the level of being the worst because it seems to be the first thing that everybody goes to, every apologist and every Christian goes to when they're saying why they believe in God, is they immediately fall back to, well, If the universe had a beginning, or everything that had a beginning has a cause, and if the universe had a beginning, then it had to have a cause, therefore God. And it's right on the tip of everybody's tongues when they want to start talking about why they believe in God. So because it's so prevalent, I tend to put it as the number one for bad arguments for God. Right after that would probably be the ontological argument, the maximally great being one, because it's so batshit insane. The teleological one is probably one of the better ones. The idea of design. The universe seems designed, so there must be an intelligent designer. Only because it seems rational at first glance. Although, when you really think about it, is there really a lot of evidence for design in the universe? Or is there just the complexity that can come about naturally? I mean, the very idea that nature tends towards disorder in all things 100% of the time is not one that's backed up by reality. Certainly, there can be disorder. There can be chaos. There's entire sections of the universe that are incredibly chaotic, and when you get close to a black hole, the very laws of physics start to break down, or at the quantum level, our understanding of physics breaks down. But then there are other parts of the universe that are very structured, very ordered. And so both order and complexity and chaos and disorder are natural states, as far as I'm concerned. So just because there is order to some parts of the universe doesn't necessarily point to a designer, as far as I'm concerned. And then once you get into some of the things that they often point to as evidence of design, they always go for the eye. Look how complex the eye is. They always go towards, look at how complex the human body is, and things like that. Well, as has been said 100 times before by people much smarter than me, if it's design, it's the worst design possible, because we are just so full of flaws, and everything that has some order to it is so full of flaws. Every creature has flaws in the way they're put together, and everything that you can point to that and say, hey, look, that's ordered, well, here, look at how many flaws it has as well. A perfect creator with perfect knowledge and perfect power just doesn't seem there would be any reason for there to be so many flaws baked into everything that exists if it was designed and created by such a all-knowing, all-powerful creator being. So even though that argument, the design argument, is one of the better ones, it still kind of falls apart. Other arguments, the argument from beauty is just crazy. Just because there are things we find aesthetically pleasing doesn't mean that there's any kind of God behind any of it. The argument from objective morality, I've argued against that one many times in a number of my videos. I don't believe there is such a thing as objective morality, and the idea that any kind of morality could be objective seems like a contradiction in terms. Morality, by its very nature, is subjective. You can't make a value judgment about something being good or bad unless you have a subject to do it. So it's automatically subjective. So those are some of my rundowns of some of the most common bad theist arguments. William Robinson in the chat asked, do you plan on revealing your face at some point? Well, as I said a few minutes ago, I think I have a face for radio, so generally I prefer to speak through the avatar. I will say, if anybody can find it, I have another channel here on YouTube that deals with stuff completely non-related to religion and non-related to philosophy, and I have some videos on there where I've shown my face, and a couple people from that channel have found this channel and have popped into some of the discussion threads, but it's possible. I mean, as my channel grows and I get into doing more things, it's always possible that I may decide to do some videos where I'm not using the Plink avatar. So it's possible at some point, but I don't have super plans on it right now. Trying to smash, just did a super chat. Doing well, brother. who have been the most influential thinkers on our side that you respect, motivate you, or do attribute to your well-being? I knew how I felt when I found Bertrand Russell. So, in the area of just counter-apologetics and atheism in general, there's obviously some of the big names, Christopher Hitchens, Sam Harris. One of the first outspoken atheists that I listened to was actually Penn Jillette. Back when I still was a Catholic and fully believing, and I've always liked comedy and magicians, and he was both. And then sometimes he would blend some of that into talking about his atheism. And at the time when I first started listening to him talk about that, I was resistant to it because I was still a believer at the time. But I do like the way he talked about his atheism, and he tries to be very inclusive. Like, he goes and talks to religious people all the time, and he's very accommodating of their beliefs. He doesn't try to rag on their beliefs necessarily. So that way of talking to religious people is, I think, a good way to start a dialogue with them, because it helps them to feel respected and heard, which is what everybody really wants, honestly, to be respected and heard. And it's not as much of a combative way of trying to start a dialogue. So Penn Jillette kind of helped me get started wanting to listen to atheists and anti-apologist people back when I was religious myself. Then when it comes to YouTube, I have people who I kind of emulate a little bit. Obviously, Vice Rhino and Sir Sick are a couple of the big ones that I kind of have patterned my style of videos after a little bit. So those are some of the names of people that I look up to quite a bit. In the community tab, Marcelo Suplicy says, "Don't you think that atheist discussions in YouTube are maybe a bit too focused on the US? Is there a way to include more regions and perspectives to already established channels?" That's certainly a possibility. I wonder if it's something that could even be dealt with very well, because everybody, when they're talking about their views on these things, are going to be influenced by the culture in which they come from. It would be pretty difficult of me to talk knowledgeably about how atheism and religion are practiced in countries that not only have I never been to, but I have no real connection to or exposure to in any respect. So it would be difficult for me to speak intelligently about how, say, atheism and religion are practiced in East Asian countries or in African countries or the Middle East. All I have on those sort of things are what I can read in the headlines in the newspaper and things like that. So I don't know if it's a hill we can mount in terms of making discussions about religion more global, just to have these basic discussions. So it can be something that maybe people should try to deal with a little more, but it's certainly anything that anybody talks about where religion is concerned is going to be shaped by the culture in which they are ensconced, in which they were raised in, probably. All right. Oh, yeah, some people in the chat. Pelagia, absolutely. Pelagia is the man. Also, Prophet of Zod. If I'm just name dropping here, Prophet of Zod also is awesome. Telltale is obviously awesome. So yeah, I could just sit here and drop names on atheist YouTubers that I love. Sarcastic Savior asks, have you ever thought about reviewing atheist debates, such as the ones between Christopher Hitchens and Doug Wilson, or between Sam Harris and William Lane Craig? I don't know that I will ever make a video where I'm critiquing debates like that, because I feel like what could I possibly add to the likes of Christopher Hitchens or Sam Harris that they aren't saying themselves, you know? It's like those are some really great debaters, and their words can obviously speak for themselves. And every time I watch like a Hitchens debate, it just seems like it's it's so one-sided. And obviously I'm a bit biased on his side or on the side of any atheist debater. But, you know, those kind of debaters just do such a great job of articulating their thoughts and their points of view in ways that's like, how do you improve on that? I mean, I've quoted Christopher Hitchens in some of my videos when I wanted to make a point, and I realized he did it far better than I ever could. So I don't, and also because I usually try to find somewhat shorter videos to respond to because I tend to really go into depth on my responses. Like the video I did on capturing Christianity, I took 3 short videos that were less than a minute apiece, and just talking about those 3 minutes worth of content, I talked for 25 minutes. So if I were to take an hour and a half debate between a theist and an atheist and try to break it down, it would end up being like a 10-hour thing, and I don't have the stamina for that. But yeah, mainly what could I add that they don't say themselves? All right. So another question coming into the community tab from Douglas Gordon said, is a religious person more prone to believe conspiracy theories? I don't necessarily think that's the case. There's plenty of people who believe in all sorts of conspiracy theories who wouldn't consider themselves religious at all. In fact, some of the conspiracy theories that people believe in are conspiracies about religion. And so they would never attach themselves to a religion because they view the church as part of the problem and part of the conspiracy. So, and I wouldn't even necessarily say are religious people more gullible. A lot of times, in fact, I might even say in most cases, people who are religious are that way because they were indoctrinated into it and they don't want to let it go. Certainly, I was religious for as long as I was because I didn't want to let it go. If you have a religion built into you from birth to the point where it becomes part of your personality, you start to wonder who you are if you're not that religion. When I was deconverting, I wondered, who am I if I am not a Catholic? What am I if I am not a Catholic? And so there's plenty of very intelligent, very rational people who can even be skeptical in almost every other area of their life who do hold to a religion because it's been built into them and it's very difficult to let go of something that has been a core part of your personality and your life for as long as it has been. So I might say people who were never religious but then converted into religion and then got very, very deep into it might be more prone to conspiracy theories. Like somebody who was never religious and believed that the earth was billions of years old and everything, and then became religious and became a young earth creationist and went full tilt into the depths of Christian conspiracies and fundamentalism. That person might be more prone to believing outrageous things, and they may be more prone to conspiracy theories. Also, if you start talking about flat earthers, it's very hard to find flat earthers who are not heavily religious a lot of the times. So there can be a link between believing in conspiracy theories and becoming heavily religious, but it's a correlation that I would never say it has a causation. I don't think that necessarily religious people are more prone to being conspiracy theorists. All right. So then, a couple more that I got off the community tab. One came from Jenna that says, the problem I see with atheism is its focus on logic and reason. It's, of course, the right, smart thing, but it doesn't appeal as much as emotions and feelings. Marketers have known this forever. How can atheists sell the sizzle and not the steak? Or will atheists only ever have the defensive posture? I mean, Christianity is selling an incredibly unbelievable tale using belonging, community, love, salving of regrets, and all the rest. What is the atheist's story? Give me some spin. So there's some truth to that certainly religion, Christianity, or any religion is selling a more comforting story. The idea of a all-powerful being looking out for you, who's got your best interest at heart, who controls everything, and even if they have some reasons to give you some hardship in life, will make sure that everything works out in the end. That's definitely a very comforting story. But there's been a lot of comforting explanations, supernatural explanations of everything in this world that have given way to reason eventually. I mean, the various ways of thinking about what the sun was from ancient cultures, whether it was the Eye of Ra, or whether it was Apollo riding his chariot across the sky. A lot of different thoughts about the supernatural nature of the sun. Well, when we learned what the sun actually was, it doesn't matter how comforting those supernatural views were, they yielded to reason at a certain point. When it was thought that the Earth was the center of the universe and everything revolved around the Earth. Even though there are still some people who hold to that to this day, same with flat Earth ways of thinking, it yielded eventually to the reason that we are not the center of the universe, we are orbiting around the sun is not the center of the universe. So, no matter how comforting supernatural beliefs can be, eventually they tend to give way to reason at some point. Even if it takes a long time, even if we're not going to see it in our lifetime, if you look at the trend of religious prominence, it's been on a downward trajectory for a long time. And in some countries more than others, it's less than 50% now. And even in the United States, the none category, people who declare no particular religion, is higher than it's ever been, and it's poised to only go higher from here. So I would say that the way to sell atheism is really just that it has reason and logic on its side in a way that no religious belief kind of does. And that eventually superstition and supernatural beliefs will give way to reason. So that's what I would say to that. Super chat from Azofi says, congrats on 5K. Thank you very much. I enjoy your content, and I encourage you to do more content, especially on more specific evidential claims and arguments like martyrdom, literary analysis of the Book of Mormon, etc. Keep it up. Mormon is something I haven't touched on in any of my videos yet. Certainly is something I could do so. I have a lot of ideas of videos I want to make in the future. I mean, at only 3 months old my channel is, and only about 25 videos done, there's a lot of ground left to cover, and I definitely intend to branch out into some more different areas of religion, and as I talked about before, maybe some political matters as well. So yeah, a lot of places to go in the future, so thank you. All right, so I had one more question that I pulled off of the community tab. This one came from Lars Cade. Says, if Christian heaven were real as described in the Bible, would you want to be there? Follow up, is there any sort of eternal existence that I'd want? So the Christian heaven is described in the Bible, and my Catholic faith has been reinforced throughout my years. No, I would not want to be there. I've talked about this in a number of videos already, but if I had to exist for all eternity in a place where everyone I knew in life who was Jewish, Muslim, Hindu, atheist, agnostic, or any of the other world's religions that weren't Christianity, they didn't get to go, and instead they got a one-way ticket to hell, I can't imagine I would ever want to be in heaven with that on my conscience. And I can't imagine any just and loving God who would do anything like that. But that is the way it's laid out in the Bible. I am the way and the truth and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. The idea is if you are not a Christian, you go one-way ticket to hell. And I cannot abide by that. I would never want to exist in a heaven for all eternity with that on my mind. And even without that, let's say best possible scenario, that universal salvation was the reality, and everyone, no matter what, went to heaven at some point. Even if you had to do a little bit of penance before you got there, everybody got to heaven eventually. I can't imagine that I'd want to be there for eternity either, because eternity is a hell of a long time, and I can't imagine ever being able to enjoy absolute eternity. It has to get boring at some point. Especially if you think about heaven in the kind of terms of, you have a body, you're experiencing things. If you think about heaven like the movie What Dreams May Come with Robin Williams, great movie, beautiful movie, I loved it. But in that, he dies, he goes to his idea of heaven, he's got a body, he's got hands and feet, he sees out his eyes, he hears with his ears, he can converse with other people, and he can go and meet up with old friends and family who he knew in life and everything. I can't imagine wanting to have that for eternity. That would get immensely tedious. Even if that took billions of years to happen, it's going to get tedious. There's no way you would not tire of a bodily existence. And even if it wasn't that, if it was more spiritual, if you existed as like energy, as a soul without a body or something like that, if I still had a mind that worked the same way my mind does work, same thing. It's going to get boring at a certain point, to the point of it becoming unbearable. Show my geek cred. There's an episode of Star Trek Voyager where a member of the Q, the kind of space gods, wants to commit suicide because he is tired of existing. And he's a god. He can do anything. He can exist in any form he wants and do anything he wants, and he's tired of it. And I kind of imagine that would have to happen at some point. Even if it took billions of years to get there, I would imagine you'd have to get to a point where you don't want to exist anymore. And so that's my idea on that. I can't imagine any eternal existence that I would actually want. Then, in the chat, Science Saves asked, favorite atheist YouTube video? A single atheist video? I can't even say. I've literally watched thousands, if not more than that, of atheist videos on YouTube over the years, and I couldn't possibly narrow it down to just one. I think the best I could do is again go back to my favorite YouTube content creators like Vice Rhino, Sir Sick, Prophet of Zod, Telltale, Shannon Q. I very oftentimes, when I'm at work and I'm like putting news articles together to put over the air, I'll have episodes of The Atheist Experience or The Line or Talk Heathen on in the background as I'm doing my news research and everything, just as background listening to while I'm doing my work. So yeah, I could never narrow it down to a single individual video. There's just so many of them that I like. Oh yeah, and somebody else, Matt Hill in the chat says Logic. Yeah, absolutely. Loved Logic as well. So those were the questions that I pulled off the community tab, and I see we're over the hour mark. So we'll start to wrap things up here for the evening. So yeah, anytime anybody has any other questions they'd like to throw my way, you can always throw them into the comment section of just about any video. I regularly peruse the new comments that come in, so I'll likely to see it. Once again, anytime anybody has any videos they'd like me to respond to, make a video response to them, don't hesitate to throw them my way and suggest them to me. The last few videos that I've made have been based on suggestions that people have made to me. David John Wellman too, TMM as well. I absolutely love him. David John Wellman's stuff on Christ Righteous is absolutely awesome. The entire reason I've never made a video on Christ Righteous is because Logic and David John Wellman did such great jobs taking them down. There was absolutely nothing I could have added to it. So yeah, anything you'd like to suggest to me to view, shoot them my way. Smash the like button, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff to help keep my channel going. And beyond that, that is where we'll kind of wrap things up for the night. Oh, Godless Granny as well. Yeah, we could sit here talking and just name dropping all the awesome YouTube atheist content creators. But that's where we'll close things off for the night. So appreciate everybody for being here. Oh, another super chat from Trying to Smash. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. So thanks for watching, everybody. Till next time, I'm Professor Plink, reminding you to keep striving for greater understanding. It's the best way to get wherever you want to go.